There's still quite a good number of bands and musicians that I'd like to go into, but since we mentioned the nice guys, and I was tempted to talk a little bit about the dirtbags in rock and roll, I'll do it anyway. My reasoning for not doing was that, hey, everybody already did that, but unfortunately, being such a horrible person is almost by default. So I want to tell you who are, from my perspective, the worst of the worst. Award of most evil or horrible people in rock and roll. Of course, first of all, on top of the list, we must mention two that I not normally think about, but just simply because what they did has to be universally decried. And the number one is Vince Neil, a murderer, plain and simple. He murdered two people already in his life, right? One was Razzle from Hanoi Rocks, and the other one was just recently. Maybe he wasn't directly in person involved. It was maybe his pilot or his driver, but I think it was him. So he caused the death of another human being. So inexcusable, just because you're a retard and irresponsible and famous shouldn't give you leeway, and you shouldn't get away with that. And the second one, in the same vein, is Michael Schenker. Great guitar player. I never really got into his style, but I still do have a lot of respect for the guy from that perspective. But at a certain point, he was in such a crisis, such a need for drugs, that he told his manager that he would burn his house on his wife and children. His manager decided to get him off the drugs, cold turkey, and that was the result. And he made good on his promise. So he burned the house while his wife and kids were in there. I hope that she left him. But anyway, again, there's no excuse for such behavior, none whatsoever. So these two have to be said on top of the heap, even though from let's just say a general behavioral personality perspective, there are much worse than them. To me, on top of the Olympus, the worst of the worst, and I'm not even sure why I got such a hard on him, but at a certain point, I started developing like this real intense hatred towards Ingrid Malmsteen. I don't know why. Every time I see him in interviews, the more I read about him, and I like his music a lot. Actually, I never covered him, but I did have all of his discography up to a certain point. I think Fire and Ice '92, mid '90s, something like that. Then I kind of lost interest. But the guy is just so arrogant, such a condescending narcissist. He thinks that he's up there with the greatest of the greatest. And again, doesn't take away from his greatness, but I view him a lot like EVH, like Eddie Van Halen. And I know people get all worked up and excited if someone, God forbid, dares voicing the slightest criticism of Van Halen. Mm, To me, Van Halen is innovative and flashy and cool and technical and all of the good things that you can say about them, but he was mostly kind of like a one-trick pony on one hand, and on the other hand, he didn't have that vision, in my opinion, to lead the band to a little bit less, let's just say, abrasive or less destructive path. Again, this doesn't go directly in the music, but I'm still talking. So especially when Sammy Hagar came. Actually, not necessarily. When they became very poppy, so after, which one was it? Women and Children first, I think. A couple, two or three records before they switched to Sammy Hagar. Himself is a very sweet guy. But anyway, I'm kind of getting lost here and going off on a tangent on Van Halen. Doesn't belong in this list, for sure not. I'm sure he did some unsavory things. Actually, the way he screwed over Michael Anthony might kind of push him towards this list, but he's not, definitely doesn't belong in here. Unfortunately, there's way worse than him. So I'm talking about Monster, who, in my opinion, is kind of like on a very same vein as Eddie Van Halen, kind of like a one-trick pony, despite all of his wonderful and good stuff that he does, but kind of like a one-trick pony, and he has such a high opinion of himself and speaks down about everybody else in a very disgusting way. And a while ago, he was on Rick Beato, so I don't know what Rick did to him. I don't know if he promised him money or he gave him a course on how to pretend to be a normal human being. But I'm sure that he was very, very well prepared before that interview, because it was nice and sweet to Rick. Again, it's not like he had a reason to be obnoxious to him. Plus, also he calmed down already. Obviously, he's getting a bit, But to me, he's like on top of the heap, and I like have an intense hatred for him, even though he never did anything bad for me. Oh, of course, his copyright battles. If you dare posting even a song of his on YouTube or one of these medias, he would immediately contact them. And this is not necessarily coming from his management or his record label. That's him. He will put down like these small YouTubers and trample them and screw them over for like a little, infringement on his copyrights. And again, it's not like I'm taking copyrights lightly. Copyrights definitely have to be respected. But on the other hand, there's some leeway. You can put a song for free. The guys are not making any money out of it. They're giving you free advertisement, and you go and spit on it. So in my book, this is horrible, this is terrible, this is inexcusable, this is petty, and this just shows how ugly and disgusting and rotten of a human being you are. So Ingrid J. Malmsteen, not the other Ingrid Malmsteen, Ingrid J. Malmsteen, I spit on you because you're a despicable, horrible, disgusting human being. No matter how well you can play the guitar. I'm that's it. I'm not going to mention that there's another episode that there's a journalist, Stephen Rosen, who got into like a whole scuffle with him, and then they became friends. So I'm kind of critical of Stephen for sort of whitewashing, retroactively whitewashing, retroactive. Another one, pretty obvious choice is Axl Rose. Again, I have no claims or no big complaints against Guns N' Roses. Great band, flash in the pan. They came, they went, but they sold millions of records, and again, pretty deservedly. At least the one after that for Destruction was a good record. But none of that justifies all of the disgusting and horrible behavior of Axl Rose on many, many levels, financially and throughout the years, and the same thing, acting like a complete obnoxious douchebag. And actually, I don't like any of the people, as far as I can remember, from that band. I'm not a huge fan of Slash, but none of them reaches such a level of narcissism and arrogance and pride like Axl Rose. He takes himself for some sort of god, or he isn't. Uh, the record that he wrote on his own and called it Guns N' Roses, it took him like 14 years to release it. It's crap. It's garbage. It's nothing. So that much for him. Another one, and I wish this weren't so, because I like the band. I'm a big fan, or relatively big fan of Megadeth, but Dave Mustaine, absolute horrible, horrible throughout his career. I was so waiting for him to calm down and mellow down, and it just doesn't happen. The guy almost, I don't want to say he's there, but not quantitatively, but in principle, he's kind of like a little Axl Rose. And one of the things that got me is not even the way that he treated his own musicians. And there's a lot to say about that. Pretty much every one of them. His drummer, his first drummer, Nick Manza, I think, and Ellefson on numerous occasions. But to me, what really, really got me and what made me lose most of my respect for him was when he went on a movie. I think there was a Metallica um, documentary, if I'm not mistaken. They invited him, and the fact that he keeps harping it every single interview almost, he needs to mention that he's been fired from Metallica and it could have been, and he's so jealous. It's just beyond belief. The guy built an empire. He has anything that anyone could ever dream about it. Money, cars, women, success, great records, great musicians, toured the world, make tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And the one thing that hurts him is that he's been kicked out of Metallica. He would have been part of a machine. Now, he was the leader. He did what he wanted. He made something in the same zip code, but different, in my opinion, better. He's like a lot of jazzy ideas that's way better than what Metallica usually does. Metallica to me is kind of like a one-trick pony. They had Master of Puppets, and whatever else they released after or before doesn't really speak to me. I'm not super impressed. They have good songs here and there throughout the entire career from each record. Yeah, okay, so nothing against them, but Megadeth was banging out great album after great album. Not just with Marty. Marty, of course, yeah, made it very very big, but even without Marty. So in Dave's merit, it's a very good band. Let's put it this way. But for him to be obsessed over something that happened 40 years ago, and it was 100% justified. If you got to get kicked out of Metallica for partying too hard, it's like a Paul Diano kind of situation, right? You get kicked out of a rock and roll band because you're doing too much booze and drugs and crap, then you deserve it, and you have to go. So anyway, the point is that he went on this movie, this documentary, and he started whining like a little bitch. He's one of the other members of Metallica. You're 40 years ago, you fired me, you know. And every time I walk in the street, and a little kid comes up to me and goes, Metallica, it's like breaks my heart. Are you not ashamed of yourself? Are you not ashamed of yourself? In a world where even people who have it all, they have good health and they have a family and a good job and relatively good financially, they still have to struggle. They'll still never be at that level. And this is what you complain about. It's just disgusting. It's childish. Act like a 4 years old. Another one. David Lee Roth. Can't stand this guy. Another arrogant, so full of himself. I never liked him as a frontman. I never liked him even in the beginning of Van Halen. I don't really like him vocally. He's got some good stuff. You gotta give it to him. He has the famous solo album. I think immediately when he left Van Halen, or one or two after. So he did some real cool stuff. I gotta give it to him. But as a person, horrible person. Same thing, arrogant, so full of himself, so haughty, and talking down to everybody, and all his feuds with the other guy, with Sammy Hagar. But you see, Sammy Hagar always kept it kind of almost gentlemanlike. Never gave back the belt. And DLR always got there down and dirty, and then to hurt and to smear and to smirch and to put down. Now I gotta say, with the bad, I have to mention the good. On his private life, he's a pretty solid guy. He volunteers for some EMS service, and he just does it. And he goes out in the street and saves people's lives, people he never heard about. But as soon as you bring him into the world of rock and roll, he becomes an absolute dirtbag. But that's what it is. Another one that's very very painful for me to mention, because that's a guy who I've been in love with, or idolizing for a very, very long time. That's Richard Blackmore. Again, another absolute disgusting dirtbag, for the way he treats other people left and right, and the way he let Deep Purple destroy one of the biggest bands on earth mid-tour. I don't care what happened there. Again, Richard Blackmore, you're very very high up there. Now he's kind of mellowing down, and he's starting to be sorry a little bit for some of the things he did, and so he's trying to kind of very very dishonestly and disingenuously kind of backtrack or backpedal some of the things he did. I think his wife had a lot of influence on him. This is the first time after 3 or 4 marriages that he married this chick from Long Island, who was with him in Blackmore's Night. So I think she was able to restrain him, but he was already, I think, over 40. I think when they got married, he was like double her age. He was 60, he was 30 or something like that. But anyway, that's their business, not mine. So that's for Richard Blackmore. Since we're talking about Richard Blackmore, there's another one who is not so famously such a piece of crap, but that's Ian Gillan, also from Deep Purple. And I think the only reason, or at least the main reason, why no one talks about him in this context is because he's always overshadowed by Blackmore. And I think that was what really bothered him in the band as well. But this Gillen, he's not far from Blackmore. I'm not gonna say he's right up there, but he did things that are could really easily compete with Blackmore. Most famously, the way that he cheated and didn't pay his own band when he was in Gillingham. That's out there on the internet. You can go look it up. He screwed over his musicians. He was making a mint. He was making a mint, and he cheated his bandmates. So very very disgusting person. In the meet and greet packages also, he doesn't come out. Whenever you buy meet and greet packages with Deep Purple, you don't get Ian Gillan. Now, from my perspective, that would be good because I'm interested in the musicians, not in the clown on this stage. Even though he's a good vocalist, no one can take it away from him. But I'm here 90% for the music. Vocals is only 10% for me. So there's Ian Gillan, and there's another one who would probably surprise you to belong on this band, and that's Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. Another horrible person, another person who has such a high opinion of him. I don't know how he can even get into his house. He probably has a special gate, double door gate to open into that is heaven. But also with the copyrights, I remember in the early 2000s, he put a whole expose in one of these pseudo-intellectual papers, I think the Atlantic or one of those, why, how, the copyrights is wronging the artist. And he was always about giving the free reign to the artist, free artistic license from the record company. Why should the record company pay for your artistic license? The record company is a business. They want to make money. And of course, they will steer everyone, the distributors, the artists, whoever is involved, into making as much money as possible in as little time as possible. You are the artist. You want full, free artistic license, then go ahead and pay for it. You rent the musicians. You rent the studio. You publish the record on your own dime, and then you can do whatever you want. And guess what? That's what happened with Under Rex. Universal recognized as the worst ever Jethro Tull record. That should have been a Ian Anderson solo record. And I think he did it on his own dime, or somehow convinced the record company to give him full artistic license, and what came out of it was a piece of crap, essentially. Yes, even Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull can make a piece of crap, and the way he came down on people who dared, putting some of his videos on YouTube. He didn't go as far as Monster to really go after them legally, or Metallica, but he wrote this very very disingenuous and very talking down and condescending article about how they owe him like some sort of deity. Well, maybe we live in a society where we kind of idolize these people, right? Because we live for the entertainment essentially, in a way, even if we don't openly admit it. But that's my short list. Of course, there's many others that could be mentioned, but from the narrow circle from which I draw the music that I listen to, these are the ones that come to mind at first. But I hope in the next video to talk about something positive, and until then, don't forget to keep just rocking on and on and on and on.